Jerry Lee Lewis was born September 29, 1935, to Elmo and Mamie Lewis in Faraday, Concordia, Paris. He grew up in an impoverished farming family in eastern Louisiana. In his youth, he began playing the piano with two of his cousins, Mickey Gilley, who later became a popular country music singer, and Jimmy Swaggart, later a popular television evangelist. His parents mortgaged their farm to buy him a piano. Lewis was influenced by piano-playing older cousin Carl McVoy, who later recorded with Bill Black's combo, the radio, and the sounds of the Hanny Big House, a black juke joint across the tracks. On November 19, 1949, Lewis made his first public performance of his career, playing with a country and western band at a car dealership in Faraday. On the live album by request, More of the Greatest Live Show on Earth, Lewis is heard as naming Moon Mulligan as an artist who inspired him. His mother enrolled him at Southwest Bible Institute in Waxahachie, Texas, so that he could sing evangelical songs exclusively. When Lewis daringly played a boogie-woogie rendition of My God is Real at a church assembly, it ended his association with the school the same night. After that incident, he went home and started playing at clubs in and around Faraday and Natchez, Mississippi, becoming part of the burgeoning new rock and roll sound, and cutting his first demo record in 1952 for Cosmo Matassa in New Orleans. Now, it was around 1955 he traveled to Nashville, where he played in clubs and attempted to build interest, but was turned down by the Grand Ole Opry, as he was already at the Louisiana Hayride country stage and radio show in Shreveport. In November of 1956, Lewis traveled to Memphis, Tennessee to audition for Sun Records. Label owner Sam Phillips was in Florida, but producer and engineer Jack Clements recorded Lewis's rendition of Ray Price's Crazy Arm and his own composition End of the Road. In December 1956, Lewis began recording prolifically as a solo artist and as a session musician for other Sun artists, including Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash. Now, his distinctive piano playing can be heard on many tracks recorded at Sun in late 1956 and early 1957, including Carl Perkinson's Matchbox, Your True Love, and Put Your Cat's Clothes On, and Billy Lee's Riley, Flying Saucers, Rock and Roll. On December 4, 1956, Elvis Presley dropped in on Phillips to pay a social visit while Perkins was in the studio cutting new tracks with Lewis, backing him on the piano. Johnny Cash was also there watching Perkins. The four then started an impromptu jam session, and Phillips left the tape running. These recordings, almost half of which were gospel songs, have been released on CD as $1 Million Quartet. Tracks also include Elvis Presley's Don't Be Cruel and Paralyzed, Chuck Berry's Brown-Eyed Handsome Man, and Pat Boone's Don't Forbid Me. Lewis's own singles, on which he was billed as Jerry Lee Lewis, and his pumping piano, advanced his career as a soloist during 1957, with hits such as Whole Lot of Shakin' Going On, a Big Maybelline cover, and Great Balls of Fire, his biggest hit, bringing him international fame, despite criticism for the songs, which prompted some radio stations to boycott them. Interesting enough, in 2005, Whole Lot of Shakin' Going On, one of the songs that were banned, was selected for permanent preservation in the National Recording Registry of the Library of Congress. According to several first-hand sources, including Johnny Cash, Lewis, a devout Christian, was troubled by the sinful nature of his own material, which he believed was leading him and his audience to hell. You can see this, or should I say, this aspect of Lewis's character was depicted in Waylon Payne's portrayal of Lewis in the 2005 film Walk the Line, based on Cash's autobiographies. As part of his stage act, Lewis used to pound the keys with his heels, kicking the piano bench aside, and played standing, ranking his hands up and down the keyboard for dramatic effect, sat on the keyboard, and even stood on top of the instrument. Lewis told the Pop Chronicles that kicking over the bench originally happened by accident, but when it got a favorable response, he kept it in the act. His first TV appearance, in which he demonstrated some of these moves, was on The Steve Allen Show on July 28, 1957, where he played A Whole Lot of Shakin' Going On. His dynamic performance style can be seen in films such as High School Confidential. He sang the title song from the back of a flatbed truck and Jamboree. Lewis's turbulent personal life was hidden from the public until May 1958 British tour, where Ray Berry, a news agency reporter at London's Heathrow Airport, learned about Lewis's third wife, Myra Gay Brown. She was Lewis's first cousin once removed, and 13 years old, even though Lewis said she was 15, while Lewis at the time was 22 years old. The publicity caused an uproar, and the tour was canceled after only 3 concerts. In 1960, Sam Phillips opened a new state-of-the-art studio, and also opened a studio in Nashville. It was the latter studio that Lewis recorded his only major hit during this period, a rendition of Ray Charles's What Did I Say in 1961. In 1963, Jerry Lee Lewis's Sun recording contract ended, and he joined Smash Records, where he made several rock recordings that didn't further his career. The team at Smash, a division of Mercury Records, came up with I'm on Fire, a song that they felt would be perfect for Lewis, and as Colin Escott writes in the sleeve to the retrospective A Half Century of Hits, Mercury held the presses, thinking they had found Lewis's comeback hit, and it might have happened if the Beatles hadn't arrived in America, changing radio playlists almost overnight. Mercury didn't really know what to do with Lewis after that. One of Smash's first decisions was to record a retread of his Sun hits, Golden Hits of Jerry Lee Lewis, which was inspired by the continuing enthusiasm European fans had shown for Lewis's firebrand of rock and roll. In June 1963, Lewis returned to the UK for the first time since the scandal that had nearly ended his career 5 years earlier, to headline a performance on the MV Royal Daffodil for a cross-channel rock and roll cruise from Southend, Essex, UK to Bologna, France. For this performance, he was backed by Ritchie Blackmore and the Outlaws. However, despite his successful live tours, none of Lewis's early Smash albums, including The Return of Rock, Memphis Beat, and Soul My Way, were commercial successes. However, one major success during these lost years was the concert album Live at the Star Club, Hamburg, recorded with the Nashville Teens in 1964, which is considered one of the greatest live albums ever. Frustrated by Smash's inability to score a hit, Lewis was planning on leaving the label when promotions manager Eddie Kilgore called him and pitched the idea of cutting a pure country record in Nashville. With nothing to lose, Lewis agreed to record the Jerry Chestnut song, Another Place, Another Time, which was released as a single on March 9, 1968, and to everyone's amazement, shot up the country charts. At the time of the release, Lewis had been playing Lago in a rock and roll adaptation of Othello called Catch My Soul in Los Angeles, but was soon rushed back to Nashville to record another batch of songs with producer Jerry Kennedy. What followed was a string of hits that no one could have ever predicted. Although country music always remained a major part of Lewis's repertoire, the last time Lewis had a song on the country charts was with Pen and Paper in 1964, which had reached number 36. But Another Place, Another Time would go all the way to number 4 and remain on the charts for 17 weeks. Between 1968 and 1977, Lewis had 17 top 10 hit singles on Billboard country charts, including 4 chart toppers. Hits included What Made Milwaukee Famous Has Made a Loser Out of Me, To Make Love Sweeter for You, She Still Comes Around to Love What's Left of Me, Since I Met You Baby, Once More with Feeling, One Has My Name, The Other Has My Heart, and Sometimes a Memory Ain't Enough. The production on his early country albums, such as Another Place, Another Time, and She Even Woke Me Up to Say Goodbye, was sparse, quite different from the slick Nashville sound that was predominant on country radio at the time, and also expressed a full commitment by Lewis to a country audience. The song still featured Lewis's imitable piano flourishes, where critics were most taken aback by the rock and roll pioneer's effortless, soulful vocals, which possessed an emotional resonance on par with the most respected country singers of the time, such as George Jones and Merle Haggard. In a remarkable turnaround, Lewis became the most bankable country star in the world. He was so huge in 1970 that his former Smash producer, Shelby Singleton, who had purchased Sun Records from Sam Phillips in July of 1969, wasted no time in repacking many of Lewis's old country recordings with such effectiveness that many fans assumed they were recent releases. One of his later unreleased Sun recordings, 1 Minute Past Eternity, was issued as a single and soared to number 2 on the country charts, following Lewis's recent Mercury hit, She Even Woke Me Up to Say Goodbye. Lewis played on the Grand Ole Opry for the first time and only time on January 20th, 1973. It was 18 years since he had left Nashville broke and disheartened. As recounted in a 2015 online Rolling Stone article by Bevel Docklerly, Lewis opened with his comeback single, Another Place, Another Time, ignoring his allotted time constraints and thus commercial breaks. Lewis played for 40 minutes. The average Opry performance is 2 songs for about 8 minutes of stage time maximum, and invited Del Wood, the one member of the Opry who had always been kind to him when he had been there as a teenager, out on stage to sing with him. He also blasted through Whole Lot of Shakin' Going On, Working Man Blues, Good Golly Miss Molly, and a host of other classics. Lewis returned to the pop charts with Me and Bobby McGee in 1971 and Chantilly Lace in 1972. In this turn of events, coupled with the revitalized public interest in vintage rock and roll, inspired Mercury to fly Lewis to London in 1973 to record with a cadre of gifted British and Irish musicians, including Rory Gallagher, Kenny Jones, and Albert Lee. By all accounts, the sessions were tense. The remake of Lewis's old Sun cut, Drinkin' Wine, Spoo D.O.D., would be the album's hit single, reaching number 20 on the Billboard country charts and peaking at number 41 on the pop charts. The session would be Lewis's highest pop charting album since 1964's Golden Hits of Jerry Lee Lewis, hitting number 37. It did far better on the country album chart, rising to number 4. Later that same year, he went to Memphis and recorded Southern Route, Back Home to Memphis, a soul-infused rock album produced by Huey Meacham. According to Rick Bragg's authorized 2014 biography, the killer was in a foul mood when he showed up at Trans Maximus Studios in Memphis to record. During these sessions, he insulted the producer, threatened to kill a photographer, and drank and medicated his way into, but not out of, the fog. During one exchange that can be heard on the 2013 reissued Southern Roots, the original sessions, Mayhew asked Lewis, "Do you want to try one?" Meaning a take, to which Lewis replies, "If you got enough effing sense to cut it." Lewis was still pumping out country albums, although the hits were beginning to dry up. His last big hit with Mercury was Middle-Aged Crazy, which made it to number 4 in 1977. In 1979, Lewis switched to Elektra and produced the critically acclaimed Jerry Lee Lewis, although sales were disappointing. In 1986, Lewis was one of the inaugural inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Although looking frail after several hospitalizations due to stomach problems, Lewis was responsible for beginning an unplanned jam at the end of the evening, which was eventually incorporated into all future events. That year, he also returned to Sun Studios in Memphis to team up with Orbison, Cash, and Perkins, along with longtime admirers like John Fogerty, to create the album Class of '55. In 1989, a major motion picture based on his early life in rock and roll, Great Balls of Fire, brought him back into the public eye, especially when he decided to re-record all his songs for the movie soundtrack. The film was based on the book by Lewis's ex-wife, Myra Gale Lewis, and starred Dennis Quaid as Lewis, Winona Ryder as Myra, and Alec Baldwin as Jimmy Swaggart. The movie focuses on Lewis's early career and his relationship with Myra, and ends with the scandal of the late 1950s. A year later, in 1990, Lewis made minor news when a new song he recorded, called "It Was the Whiskey Talking, Not Me," was included in the soundtrack to the hit movie Dick Tracy. The song is also heard in the movie playing on the radio. The public downfall of his cousin television evangelist Jimmy Swaggart around the same time resulted in more adverse publicity to a troubled family. In 1998, Lewis toured Europe with Chuck Berry and Little Richard. On February 12, 2005, he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Recording Academy. And on September 26, 2006, a new album titled Last Man Standing was released, featuring many of rock and roll's elite as guest stars. Receiving positive reviews, the album charted in 4 different Billboard charts, including a 2-week stay at number 1 on the indie charts. A DVD entitled Last Man Standing Live, featuring concert footage with many guest artists, was released in March of 2007. It was in October of 2008, as part of a successful European tour, Lewis appeared at 2 London shows, a special private show at the 100 Club on October 25th, and at the London Forum on October 28th, with Wanda Jackson and his sister Linda Gale Lewis. In August of 2009, in advance of his new album, a single entitled Mean Old Man was released for download. It was written by Chris Christopherson. An EP featuring this song and 4 more was also released on November 11th. On October 29, 2009, Lewis opened the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25th anniversary concert at Madison Square Garden in New York City. In May of 2013, Lewis opened a new club on Beale Street in Memphis. Lewis is still considered actively performing in concert, though he had to cancel all shows since his February 28, 2019 stroke, waiting for the doctor's go-ahead. In 2017, Lewis made a personal appearance at the country music television Skyville Live show. It was a specially recorded performance featuring a whole array of artists paying tributes to the music of Lewis. In March 2020, it was announced that Lewis, together with producer T-Bone Burnett, was recording a new album of gospel covers. It was the first time he entered a recording studio following his stroke. On October 27, 2020, to celebrate Lewis's 85th birthday, a live stream aired on YouTube, Facebook, and his official website. The live stream special, Whole Lot of Celebrating Going On, featured appearances and performances by Willie Nelson, Elton John, Mike Love, Priscilla Presley, Joe Walsh, and others. John Stamos served as the host. Now, Lewis has been married 7 times, including bigamous marriages, and a marriage with his own underage cousin. He's had 6 children during his marriages. Now, I really couldn't do a Jerry Lee Lewis video without going into his Graceland arrest. So here goes. On November 22, 1976, Lewis was arrested outside Elvis Presley's Graceland home for allegedly intending to shoot him. Lewis also almost killed his own bass player, Butch Owens, on September 29, 1976, Lewis's 41st birthday, when a .357 Magnum accidentally went off in his hand. In Rick Bragg's 2014 authorized biography, Jerry Lee Lewis, His Own Story, Lewis said that the reclusive Presley had been trying to reach him and finally did on November 23rd, imploring him to come out to the house. Lewis replied that he would if he had time, but that he was busy trying to get his father Elmo out of jail in Tunica for driving under the influence. Later that night, Lewis was at a Memphis nightclub called Vapors, drinking champagne when he was given a gun. Lewis suddenly remembered that Elvis wanted to see him, and climbing aboard his new Lincoln Continental, with the loaded pistol on the dash and a bottle of champagne under his arm, tore off for Graceland. Just before 3 o'clock in the morning, Lewis accidentally smashed into the famous Graceland gates. Presley's astonished cousin, Harold Lloyd, was manning the gate and watched Lewis attempt to hurl the champagne bottle out of the car window, not realizing that the window was rolled up, which smashed both of them. Bragg reports that Lewis denies ever intending to do Presley harm, that the two were friends. But Elvis, watching on the closed-circuit television, told guards to call the police. The Memphis police, after arriving, found the gun in the car and put Lewis, protesting, hollering, threatening them, away in handcuffs. Lewis said, "The cops asked Elvis, 'What do you want us to do?' And Elvis told him, 'Lock him up.' That hurt my feelings. To be scared of me, knowing me the way he did, was ridiculous." Lewis was charged with carrying a pistol and public drunkenness. Released on a $250 bond, his defiant mugshot was wired around the world. Elvis Presley would die at Graceland 8 months later after this incident. Okay, that's the end of our video. I sure hope you enjoyed it. If you like this type of video and want us to keep producing them, please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you very much for watching.